Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
And today we're going to tell you how we felt about Spectre, the direct sequel to Skyfall, and more of a direct sequel than I expected it to be.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know, because a lot of the time the Bond movies, even in the Daniel Craig ones especially, have been like kind of standalone movies that like call back to the other things, but they still, I mean, like, I guess Quantum of Solace makes a big deal at the beginning of it, trying to be a direct sequel, but then it almost kind of didn't.
But there
really
are still
have to
6
be,
months in between. Like he's been dead for a while.
Yeah. So like it doesn't really have to be that. This is like, if you've not seen Skyfall, I don't know how much. Like you need to at least see Skyfall, but then it calls back to everything else in this particular franchise. So anyway, direct sequel to Skyfall, and it's Daniel Craig's presumably last Bond film.
Yes, I would gather.
And I guess he's talked a lot about how he kind of doesn't want to do it anymore, and he's
I've not heard those interviews, but I believe it.
He's been early, that's what I keep hearing, but I guess they're going to have to recast it next. And so he got 4, Pierce Brosnan got 4. 4 seems to sometimes be the magic number with Bond. And I think Pierce Brosnan had 4. And anyway, by the way, I'm not the biggest Bond fan in the world. This is not my genre in general, spy movies and stuff. The other day we had Eric and Steve do a big podcast about Bond, and I was originally supposed to be there, and I got busy, and I told them before they did it, I was like, no, that'll be a better conversation without me. Bond's like, no, not really my thing. We are talking about doing a spoiler podcast for that movie with Eric and Steve, and if I'm there, and I'll probably be at that, it'll probably be mostly them talking, and I'll say a couple things, because I just, Bond's not like
input.
Really my thing, but I enjoy it. I just usually don't tend to have a whole lot to say. So
sure.
Anyway, take my opinions with a grain of salt, but we saw a movie, so we're reviewing it. So anyway, here we go. So the setup for Spectre is that M, not really surprisingly, has left a message for Bond and sends him off on a secret mission that is that he's not able to tell MI6 about, and it gets him into big hot water with them, and he's put on indefinite suspension, and that's not really any...
Never stopped Bond before.
That's not new, especially for this Bond. He seems to constantly be going rogue and going off doing
Yeah, and then he comes back and they're like, oh, well, you were right all along, James. We accept that.
And we're continuing what we were doing in Skyfall with trying to fill in gaps in Bond's past and making it more personal for him. We're also continuing those themes that we do with a lot of these kinds of big action movies these days, and we're seeing it with a lot of superhero stuff. I talk about it all the time with the freedom versus security motif, and questioning whether or not these kind of old school agencies are even necessary anymore, and if we can completely replace them with technology. And we had a lot of that beginning in Skyfall. Of course, you had that big like deposition thing with them, and now we're trying to completely erase the the 00 program in general. And so it's about that, and then and it goes like. It's a big, international go everywhere kind of movie like Bond often is, but here I thought even more so, like, we just went all over in this.
Most of the time in these Bond movies, whatever they're doing is related in some way more specifically to Britain than other places.
Right.
I know they go other places. This is an overarching world domination problem.
Yeah, and it's not, well,
New world order.
That's a good point. Yeah, of course. And I mean, like, I'm not giving anything away by saying the big classic evil organization of the Bond movies is the big bad in this, because it's called Spectre.
It's bigger and badder than most of the big big villains we've had.
Yeah, well, and of course, there's a big reason for that. But anyway, so why don't we go ahead and get into how we felt about Spectre, and Brandon, go ahead and flip your side and tell us how you felt about this one. Go right ahead.
This movie made me feel like it's the little things that really add up. The right stuff can go a long way towards redemption.
That's really interesting. I like that.
I feel as though this movie was Well, it's Bond's send-off. This particular version of Bond's send-off. And I really got the strong feeling of that, and that overall, this brand has done what it wants to do, and I feel that overall, I now see how all these stories have come together.
Okay.
It has a flow through for me.
That's forced.
You think so?
Oh yeah, completely. Yeah,
Well,
it's a retroactive, and all these things add up. If you bought into that,
there are some loose ends, but for me,
you bought into that.
Okay. I
Okay.
would say yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't at all, and I think you're wrong. Go ahead.
Well, all right. That's okay. That's cool. I wasn't totally sold on the love interest in this movie.
Oh, I wasn't.
I
even
felt
a
like
bit.
it had a faster pace than most of the other love interests, and that's saying something, considering those are already fast. But I felt that this went further and more. They were trying to make it seem like there was more substance to this love interest, and I don't think that worked.
Well, don't you think a lot of the time in Bond movies, and again, I've not seen a lot of them, but just with my experience with these movies, you think a lot of the time it's more of a lust interest before it's a love interest?
Oh, of course, absolutely.
Yeah,
and Bond lusts after women day in, day out.
This time they kind of tried to sort of make her the one, and I don't know about that.
In the end, that's really kind of the motivation for the send-off.
Yeah, sure.
And by the end, the motivation for the send-off is more substance than the actual motivating factors.
But she becomes a plot device for that,
right?
Like,
Exactly.
it could be anybody.
Exactly. It could be anybody.
And I just, in general, didn't like her.
See,
like there's things about her that like they started to win me over slightly here and there, but overall, like there wasn't enough substance to that character.
The love interest weaves in and out of this plot, but I'll tell you what really got me.
Yeah.
And you may think I'm a total sap, but I've always
I already do.
Well, I have always loved the character of M, and Judi Dench is one of my favorite actresses.
Right.
She's up there. So when we saw M in the message, I was like, wow, that's cool.
You were expecting that? You didn't see that coming?
No, I did not see that coming. A message is left behind, yes, but the way in which this message was left behind, maybe not so much.
But I mean, she was on screen for 5 seconds. Like it wasn't a long. It shouldn't be a long message because I mean, M is cold and calculated and fast, and she doesn't go in for the sentiment that is the thing that made you like that scene.
I'll tell you what didn't work for me.
It's totally cool that she just gets on screen and says, "Bond, go to this place." The end.
True words. But I'll tell you what didn't work for me. As much as I did kind of like this villain and where this villain sits in a place of power, I don't buy that we've never, ever heard of him.
Yeah.
And that the backstory they gave for him, he should have popped up somewhere.
Well,
we
have just not
right. But that's where I agree. They came in after the fact and said, "Okay, let's make these guys come into this."
That's what I'm talking about. That's the entire villain plot, Brandon.
Well, it is, but I still liked the idea, and the idea worked for me. Not how they executed it. I am looking more at. This movie is a lot of fun for me.
But you can't execute that and make it work retroactively.
Well,
I just don't see how you do that without and this is a very difficult movie to talk about without spoiling things. And
it's true.
I'm trying to be cryptic and move around as much as I can, but
that's why I'm fumbling for words too.
Yeah, fair enough. But Brandon, I think kind of deflates some of the stuff that was done in some of these previous movies.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was never completely sold on Javier Bardem, if that's how you pronounce his name. The main villain that everybody's like, oh, he was brilliant, he was awesome, he was amazing. I was never particularly sold on him. He was too over the top.
Which one is that? Skyfall?
Yeah, that's Skyfall.
Is that the guy in Skyfall?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't think he's too over the top at all. I think it's fantastic. But
I believe that's Skyfall. Anyway,
I don't know that actor's name, man. I don't.
Are
we talking about the guy with the jaw?
Yes.
Or are you talking about the one
the
from
guy
the
with the
previous
jaw?
movie? Yeah. No, I thought he was kind of quintessential Bond villain, which is part of my problem.
He kind of is, but at the same time, I think he just knew he could get access to too much. I don't feel like he himself did it.
No, that was definitely kind of a problem. Sure, I mean, I'm not saying Skyfall's not without its...
Right, I loved it, but I just couldn't get totally behind him.
Easy plot, conveniences,
I could get more behind Christoph Waltz, probably because I like Christoph Waltz a little bit better than I like Javier. But at the same time,
that's just a taste thing, though. Does his motivations and his philosophy and stuff make more sense? Because I don't think so. I think that's all really kind of thrown together.
Well,
again, just on a first viewing, I felt like that was really thrown together.
And being after the fact, kind of trying to tie up maybe some loose ends.
It feels to me, Brandon, we went to such a big place with Skyfall that we're trying to top it.
I'm not so sure about that. There were some cool sequences in this movie, but I'm not sure they were trying to top it. I think they got to the big thing in Skyfall, and then they scaled it back as part, like it was the apex, and then it kind of came back down towards the running out.
I can't argue with you enough on this without giving everything away.
Well, I
I'm
can
not
understand.
But I do not understand that point.
Okay.
Don't even kind of... How can you possibly say that we're not trying to top things in this movie when it's trying to tie together everything that's ever happened? What are you even talking about?
Well, I think it's trying to do maybe as well as Skyfall did in that sense.
We're not talking about the same thing right now. Anyway, what else do you want to talk about?
Well, there were, like I said, I already mentioned a couple of problems that I had with this movie.
Sure.
Overall, I liked seeing Bond on the big screen again. I'm feeling it. Maybe if not for the right reasons, I'm still feeling it. I did get a kick out of it. I think it had a nice mix of action.
I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm just arguing with you about stuff.
That's fine by me. I mean, that's what we're here for.
Totally fair that you enjoyed it.
Well, I think it had a nice balance between action and... I didn't feel like there was anything that was dragging. I did not realize that it had been quite so long in the theater sitting.
Oh, that's cool.
Than it had been. So it moved for me, and I didn't feel... I mean, I had to go to the restroom twice, but I mean, that's the only thing that indicated the length of a movie that it was.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling it. I dug it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about pace yet. There's some bits that I thought it sort of dragged a little bit, but some of that is because of weird... plot point choices. Brandon, this movie made me feel like, every time I do this, my board starts erasing itself. I just gotta quit turning it over.
Colorful.
I got colorful pants now. This movie made me feel like watching Skyfall on an in-flight movie on the way to London. Which is maybe a cop-out board, because, I mean, it's really easy to just compare this to the previous movie that was just dynamite. And in my mind... a better send-off for Bond. There's a part of me that kind of wishes Daniel Craig could have ended with that movie, because I realized that every movie he's been in, up until this one, he's not really the Bond we know, and then he's getting closer to it. And you get to the end of Casino Royale, and there's that wonderful shot from underneath where it kind of goes up him, and suddenly he's like, now he's the Bond. Then you get Quantum of Solace, and they kind of back that off again. I always thought, and then Skyfall is like finally Daniel Craig is the consummate Bond, but he's still kind of moving toward it in a way, even though it's still about like an older guy that is maybe at the end of his career, but that has as much to do with just getting injured as it does with his age.
You reminded me of the progression in the 4 movies, and that speaks a lot towards what I was talking about. And you were absolutely right when you made the comment earlier about this is kind of the consummate Bond, and he's kind of suave like Bond.
Well, and that was my favorite thing about it. But I guess I'll finish the statement I was making, which is that it's easy to compare it to the last one because it's just, in my head, like the perfect Bond movie, the Skyfall for me. I just loved that movie.
It's a wonderful movie.
It's
absolutely
darn hard to top it, but. This is the same team, it's the same director. I was a little bit surprised by just how off the rails this thing gets. Yeah. And how, it almost feels like, Skyfall got lucky a little bit. To me, because there are some silly plot conveniences and things with that movie, or maybe holes, I guess is maybe a better way to put it. But this one jumps the shark by the halfway point for me. Like, I can't take it seriously after the villain gets introduced. That's it. After that, then it becomes hilarious. my favorite thing about it is we do have consummate Bond now, and he's just straight up the suave, kind of elegant, not maybe in the way he kills people sometimes, but he's much more the Bond we know, and now that we have addressed maybe some of these tropes are old-fashioned and outdated, and certain things that Bond used to have to do aren't necessary and logical in a world with the advanced technology we have. Now that we addressed that in the Skyfall, this one just straight up picks up that stuff and starts using it again, just because that's part of his style. And I really enjoyed that. The first half of this movie, I thought was dynamite. I mean, I loved it until we get to the villain. Like, I really, really liked it. It was like, it felt like a really great extension to Skyfall, but it kind of had its own tone and feel, and I thought a lot of the dialogue and one-liners and banter and stuff was really sharp-witted and fun, and I laughed a lot, but I felt like I was laughing with it, not at it, which is what I felt like I was doing toward the second half. It felt like two different movies, Brandon.
You think so?
Yeah.
See, this villain was less hokey to me than Javier's character was. That just felt too much. Except the stuff that this villain was doing was a little bit hokier. Like his setups for when he traps Bond and that whole thing goes down. That was very hokey, but I feel like the motivation behind him wasn't.
I don't understand that. His whole thing. I just don't believe him. I don't believe anything about him at all. He feels like a again, at the risk of giving stuff away. It feels like, oh cool, we finally get to do a thing that for whatever reason we weren't allowed to do before. I think there were some kind of weird rights things or something with Spectre. I don't remember what it was. Where they wanted to, as far as I understand it, they wanted to use Spectre in the first place, but they couldn't, so they made up Quantum, and then now we can use Spectre, so we have to backtrack and try to make all that fit and work together. And he was a weird plot device villain, just to kind of make all that stuff work. And I didn't buy his motivations. I didn't buy his personal vendetta against Bond. If you want to compare them, the guy from before, from Skyfall, was an ex-agent, right? Who felt like he was screwed by the system, and Bond represents everything he used to be, that he is so against now. So they had these opposing ideologies that were really interesting, and you can complain about the over-the-top acting, whatever. I appreciated finally getting some of that back in these where they can kind of have fun again. This movie doesn't balance it as well as Skyfall did. Okay. So like that, I thought, regardless again of, I don't really buy that guy's able to do everything he's able to do. But then again, Dark Knight's a wonderful movie, and of course it's borrowing a lot from Dark Knight. And that's another thing I want to mention, is that we are still doing a lot of Nolan stuff in this. Yes. We also, this is a footnote real quick, and I think this was one of the other things that made it difficult for me to take it seriously and appreciate it as much. We're also kind of ripping off Winter Soldier. Now, I'm not 100% sure that that we didn't have the script already written before anybody could have seen Winter Soldier. No idea. Again, it's no accident that so many of these things are dealing with surveillance and privacy and security and all of that stuff because of the world we live in and how advanced the technology is getting. And so, of course, a lot of things want to talk about people abusing that power and that kind of thing. Fine. But when you start comparing, again, I'm going to try not to give too much away, but when you start comparing Spectre and Hydra, it just feels like the same movie again in a lot of ways. I don't know. But anyway, so I don't know where I was going with all that, but that's. But yeah. Oh, and I was talking about Nolan stuff. So you had like in Dark Knight, the Joker had kind of the same thing where it was like I don't know how you could possibly plan for this many contingencies, and that's kind of the same thing that guy in Skyfall. But I at least sort of understood that guy more. This one, he didn't feel like a real person to me. No, even a little bit. Yeah, and again, one viewing, but yeah, I didn't buy him. I thought it jumped the shark really hard. Okay. But like I said, I I still really enjoyed myself through the first half, like I said. And there are things about the second half that I really enjoyed. The action's dynamite all the way through. Mendez, this guy can direct a movie. It's just gorgeous, and I thought he topped himself action-wise in a lot of places over Skyfall. Even it's just a thrilling movie. This is a weird case because, and I'm going to go ahead and do this right now. I don't know how to flip my sign green on this. It's just, I think, overall, not a very good movie.
Okay,
that's just my opinion.
Sure,
I'm going to flip it red. I'm going to say see it anyway, which is a really weird thing to say because the sign flip is sort of, do we think you should go or not? But it says feel it or not. At the end of the day, I'm not. However, I'm glad I went because a lot of the action was so thrilling and I enjoyed myself, but never ever get in a motor vehicle with James Bond. Because most of the time, they're not going to make it. This guy is a mass murderer of motor vehicles. Like, he blows up a helicopter, he blows up an airplane. I think it was an airplane, I forget.
Yes, there was.
He blows up a £3 million car, pound meaning the currency in, it didn't weigh that much. But it wasn't a £3 million car. It was a £3 million car. Anyway, all that stuff was great. The opening sequence before you get to the titles is probably the coolest opening to a Bond movie ever.
That was a neat opening sequence. My goodness, I
like the one in Skyfall, but it was and over the top as all get out. But anyway,
I've never seen anything quite like that.
Yeah, me neither.
That we got to see that. And we were oohing and ahhing through that.
Oh, yeah.
And it was neat to see that, do that, like that.
A lot of gorgeous, elegant photography in this. Like I said, we just go all over the place. You should see it just for scenery and atmosphere, if nothing else. So yeah, it is weird to turn my sign red. It's kind of a timid red, but I don't think it's a very good movie.
Well, you mentioned the time frame on this movie. It's very shortly after that when it feels like a sequel. When we get to see the MI5 building, I was surprised by what we were looking at because it was directly after the things of the last movie. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and that speaks to your point on that. But also, speaking of Nolan, I found it interesting. That didn't mean anything to this movie, but it was interesting to me that the building, I could recognize one of the main buildings they used in this as having been a building from the movie Inception as well, and that was kind of fun, just seeing that building used again and me being able to identify
Mendez is inspired really hard by Nolan. I like that he kind of has his own style, so he's not just visually he's not ripping Nolan off, I don't think, most of the time. I mean, like, There may be some similarities here and there, but I do think certainly that story-wise, we're still borrowing a lot of that. I'm hearing people saying that Skyfall was the Dark, and it's so funny because people always make comparisons to Skyfall and Dark Knight. Mendez makes that comparison. I mean, he was directly inspired by that movie. But people say that was the Dark Knight for this franchise, and this is the Dark Knight Rises of this franchise, and it's really funny because I'm hearing both people who like Rises and don't like Rises saying that. It's really kind of interesting. But even in some story points, yeah, it's kind of Rises.
Yeah, it's got a lot going for it. In that way, I can actually see what they're talking about, and I can understand that. I am on board with that.
But anyway, so like I said, I'm flipping my sign red. I didn't love it. I might watch it again for the things I enjoyed. But I don't know. The percentage is too low. It failed the grade for me.
I will mention this. There was a little bit of wordplay in this that wasn't raunchy wordplay, but there was wordplay specific to the movie, and in which when the new M gives his speech about the 00 program, and he says, "But we leave something behind," and it's directly related to Bond. I dig those kinds of word associations or wordplay, whatever you want to call it, inside dialogue. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, that's it for us. Everybody, thanks as always for watching. We sure appreciate it, and we will be back with you again sometime soon with another How We Felt About. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
Thanks for watching.